Thanks to the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute for having me, particularly at this critical juncture in our history, and I'm sorry that the vote schedule today keeps me from joining you in person. For nearly 20 years, from the mid-2000s to the early 2020s, electricity demand in the United States barely moved, but that era is over. Today we're facing the potential for electricity demand to grow nearly fivefold. We're facing extraordinary growth from electric vehicles, AI, data centers, and the reshoring of domestic manufacturing. And that growth is exciting, but it comes with real challenges. Americans are already feeling the strain of these increases on their wallets. Electricity costs are 5.5% higher today than they were a year ago, and natural gas is up almost 14%. Some projections show residential rates climbing as much as 18% in the coming years. We can't keep going on like this. My constituents in San Diego, like most of the country, have struggled under the weight of rising utility bills and healthcare costs associated with climate change, which have led to a lower quality of life. And as a country, we're going to need a lot more energy to compete internationally and to keep costs down. Unfortunately, we're starting from behind. The big so-called beautiful bill that Republicans passed this year devastated the incentives we had built in for renewable energy. Now, Republicans say that the reason Democrats supported more wind and solar was solely related to climate change, but that's wrong. It's really about getting power to the grid, our businesses, and our homes. Look at what China's doing. Last year, China built 90 gigawatts of coal, 80 gigawatts of wind, and 227 gigawatts of solar. Why so much solar and wind? Well, it's not because China is a warrior for climate change. No, wind and solar are the fastest ways to bring new energy to the grid. Look at Texas, oil and gas Texas. When the natural gas system failed and people died from the cold in Superstorm Uri, did Texas turn to more natural gas? No. Texas reduced its risk of blackouts and brownouts from 10% to 1% by deploying more solar energy and batteries for storage. And we didn't just harm wind and solar in the big beautiful bill. Going forward, the Trump administration is refusing to permit new wind and solar and even attempting to pull permits already issued for some offshore wind projects. That means less energy security and higher energy bills for our constituents. So what do? First, we need permit certainty. If you apply for a permit for an energy project that complies with the law, you should get a permit, and you should be able to rely on that permit. All of the thoughtful and efficient permitting improvements in the world are meaningless if administrations are allowed to revoke issued permits for partisan reasons, or if the permitting process can be subjected to political gamesmanship. I've worked with energy producers, activist groups, and their attorneys to propose bill language that would restore the ability to build all kinds of energy with fair and certain permitting processes. And I expect to introduce that as a bipartisan bill by year end. Second, we need permit reform. Our process for approving energy is just too slow. The environmental laws of the 1970s were built for defense, but the environmental imperative of today is to build, not just pipelines and gas plants, but wind, offshore wind, utility-scale solar, hydrogen pipelines, and interregional high-voltage electricity transmission. Environmental reviews can take years, followed by years more of litigation. A major power line takes 10 years to complete. 7 of those 10 years are just process. I'm glad to see that House Natural Resources Chairman Westerman has introduced the SPEED Act to reform the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, which is just a procedural statute, but has become the most litigated environmental law. In my view, SPEED should contain better permit certainty standards like I discussed earlier, but SPEED is a good start on shortening timelines and delays in today's environmental review. Third, we need to build much more interregional high-voltage transmission to carry energy from where it's generated to where demand is highest. Building a better grid is critical because it helps all energy resources. The value of both natural gas and clean energy is maximized by transmission as it increases competition and access to markets. It reduces grid congestion and ensures that customers can always get the next cheapest electron. Smarter investments in transmission can save residential customers up to $14 billion per year after accounting for the costs, and every $1 invested in transmission brings $5 in consumer benefits. Unfortunately, since 2014, North America has only built 7 gigawatts of interregional transmission lines. The comparable number in South America is 22, in Europe 44, and in China, 260 gigawatts of interregional transmission. Again, we built 7. My Speed and Reliability Act would make it easier and faster to build the big wires that are necessary to deliver power to the people who need it. Fourth, a major component of energy affordability in many areas, especially California, is wildfires, believe it or not, which have continued to grow in frequency and intensity. That's another place we need reform. Earlier this year, insurance rates for California homeowners increased at an average of 34%. Utility wildfire prevention and mitigation costs are also approaching $5 billion per year, and 40% of the increases in California's utility bills last year were due to the costs of maintaining the grid because of wildfires. That's why I've been working with Bruce Westerman, chair of the Natural Resources Committee, on the Fix Our Forests Act, which would make it easier and quicker to proactively address the growing risk of wildfires. That bill passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support in the House, and we have a companion effort in the Senate, which I hope moves very soon. We cannot meet rising demand or keep costs low if we continue doing things the same way. Today, I'm optimistic that with permitting reform negotiations going on in Congress, there is a growing coalition of stakeholders who recognize the need for consistent, effective policy that keeps us moving toward an energy-secure future while decreasing emissions. And finally, let me address the role of the future of natural gas. In 2024, the United States produced more oil and gas than any other country in world history and exported record amounts of natural gas to our allies around the world. Republicans claim that the Biden administration was waging a war on oil and gas, but if they did, it wasn't very effective because natural gas remains a huge part of the domestic and our export economy. Now, my Republican colleagues correctly point out that natural gas burns cleaner than coal and produces less carbon dioxide. And the shale revolution has made coal uneconomical in the energy markets. It wasn't government action that killed coal, but it was innovation in the private sector. So carbon emissions are down, but that's not the whole story. Let's talk about fugitive methane emissions. Methane is a powerful driver of climate change with 80% more of an impact on warming than carbon dioxide. If even just a small amount of methane leaks from the production and distribution of natural gas, the climate benefits of burning it instead of coal are canceled out. But we know how to stop that from happening. The Obama administration issued methane control rules. Trump repealed them. Biden put them back, and now Trump is repealing them again. Industry hates this back and forth, and many of the biggest energy companies, ExxonMobil, Total Energies, and Cheniere, ask that the methane rules stay in place. They know it makes business sense to have clear rules and to be able to prove that American gas is the cleanest gas. We need a bipartisan agreement on methane rules that are reliable and enforceable, something else I'm working with people on both sides of the aisle who want to solve the problem. In summary, permit certainty, faster process, more transmission, controlling wildfires, and methane rules for natural gas are the components of reform that will put the United States in a position to compete globally and provide reliable and less expensive energy for our businesses and our homes. If we continue shifting the policy landscape administration by administration, we'll fail to meet energy demand, we will not secure the grid against threats, and we won't address the worst impacts of the climate crisis. These steps will lower costs for consumers, increase resilience, and make our communities safer. And I'm confident that Republicans will come to the table. I will work with anyone, Republicans or Democrats, to reduce global emissions, grow our domestic energy industry, and ensure we don't fall behind on our goals. And we'd love to have your help with this big effort. So thank you very much for having me, and I hope you have a terrific conference.